Good morning. Today we are in the morning. We are continuing with our angles that we started this week. So we're continuing with angles, learning a little bit more about them. Today we are doing CO66. I can identify linear pairs as well as complementary, supplementary, adjacent, and vertical angles. And I did do some of our Khan Academy had to do with this, giving us an idea of what was coming up this week. So we are going to learn what each of these angle types mean and how we work with that. It's distracting to make your voices behind me as I'm talking. First one is our complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles that sum, so that means we're adding, that sum to be, anybody know? 90 degrees. So we have two angles that equal 90 degrees if we add them together. We can see those in a variety of ways. We could have that right angle that has two angles in it. Let's say this is 50 degrees and this is 40 degrees. They would be two complementary angles because if I add 40 plus 50, that is 90 degrees. They do not have to be adjacent. That means they don't have to share a side. So I could have a 50-degree angle and a 40-degree angle that are not next to each other. They are still complementary because I can add those two angles together to get 90 degrees. So either way, they could be next to each other or they could be separated. They're still complementary. So then I have supplementary angles, two angles that sum to be 180 degrees. Do not forget your degrees. It's important we have degrees in there. So 180 degrees, remember, that is our straight line. So I'm going to say maybe we had 130 degrees and we have, not 60. And 50 degrees. Together they're making that straight line. 130 plus 50 is 180 degrees. Just like with our complementary, they do not have to be next to each other making that straight line. I could have my 50 degrees and my 130 degrees. They can be separate, but as long as they add together to make 180 degrees, we know they are supplementary. Any questions on complementary and supplementary? Sometimes they're together, which makes it easy. Sometimes they're apart. We just have to always add to make sure 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Then we have adjacent angles. I did talk about that when I talked about our complementary and supplementary. If they share that side, they are adjacent. So angles that have a common side. So we have angle here, we have angles here. This is the side that they share. They share a side, they are adjacent. And I made a mistake, I forgot to put my arrows. When we are working with angles, those lines go on. So we should always have our arrows. So it could be like this. These would be adjacent because they share a common side. So adjacent angles are angles that share that common side. There's no one specific way it's supposed to look. Those angles can be different sizes. They are adjacent if they share a common side. Adjacent means it's right next to. Aiden, you look confused. They share a side. So this is one angle, this is one angle. So see how we have two angles here? The one that they share is their common side. They have a common side. They share a side. They're adjacent to each other. Okay, all those words mean the same thing. Chance.
So a line can be both, like an adjacent and like a complementary angle?
So we could have a complementary angle that is also adjacent, yes. We could have complementary angles that are not adjacent, or they are adjacent. So yes, they can be multiples of these. Could it be complementary and supplementary? No. Can it be complementary and adjacent? Can it be supplementary and adjacent? Does it have to be adjacent to be complementary or supplementary? No. It's like a rectangle can be a square, but it's not always a square. So a square is always a rectangle. Adjacent is always next to each other. They don't always have to be complementary. Okay. I need to erase so I can scroll up. Now we have linear pairs. A linear pair are adjacent angles, so they share a side. That sum to 180 degrees. It makes a line. So, if it is a linear pair, we have a straight line. We have two angles that are adjacent. Angle 1, angle 2. We know it's a straight line. So this angle plus this angle equals 180 degrees. So what else can we call it? They're adjacent, they're a linear pair, and they're what, Emily? Supplementary, because they equal to 180 degrees. So a linear pair is that supplementary angle equals 180 degrees, and they're adjacent. So they have to be adjacent. Vertical angles are angles opposite each other at a common vertex. So adjacent angles have a common side. Vertical angles have a common vertex. And you need to know this. Vertical angles are congruent. What does congruent mean? The same. So vertical angles will have the exact same measurement. So when we talk about vertical angles, we look for the X. Here's our vertex where the sides meet. So they have a common vertex. They are opposite, right across from each other from that point where they intersect. That vertex is. It was on time. So these two angles will be congruent, and these two angles will be congruent.
I did 2 lines on that one.
Why did I put one line on one set of angles and 2 lines on the other set of angles? Do you answer your own question, Evelyn? Why did I do that? Not quite, James.
Both sides are equal.
Yeah, it's to show which sides are equaling each other. Just like when we have our rectangle and we said these sides are equal and these sides are equal, right? We put 2 lines and 2 lines because these ones already had 1 line. If I did, let's look at that. If I did 1 line there to show those angles are equal, and I did 1 here and 1 here, it looks like they're all equal to each other, but they're not. So that's why we have to do 2 lines. And if you had 3 congruent pairs, you would have one that had 3 lines in it. If you have 4 congruent pairs, you'd have 4, right? So it's just showing which ones match up with the other ones. Any questions on the vertical angles? Okay. So let's look at our work for today. Study the diagrams below and use them to answer the questions. We have A, B, C, and D. Thinking about all of those new vocab words that we learned. Which diagram or diagrams, there might be more than one that fit. So remember what we talked about. Some things can be this and this, okay? So they might fit into more than one category. List all of the categories that they fit in. Then on the bottom it says draw and label a diagram for each of the following. So you're not just drawing, just like when we did those triangles and people weren't putting in the right measurements for the triangle angles. It matters, those measurements. So if I'm drawing complementary angles that are adjacent, I'm not just going to do that. What important thing do I have to do to it, Evelyn? Yeah, because I need to label it with my degrees. So I need to say 50 degrees and 40 degrees. We have to remember our labels. That really hurt us on that one Math 6 review objective. People were forgetting their labels. Labels are important. If it's complementary, we know they have to equal 90 degrees. If they're adjacent, we know what that looks like. And then we have to show our labels. Then underneath that, it says determine whether each statement below is true or false. If it is false, correct the statement. What would make it a true statement? If it's true, you just write true. Any questions on today's assignment? Okay, if you are listening at home, we hope you are well. We hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.